Welcome to the Pastor to Pioneer podcast. This is a space where we have honest conversations about the insights and stories on the journey from pastor to pioneer. I'm your host, Britton Smith. Whether you are a pastor feeling stuck and burdened by the prevailing model, dreaming of another way, or you're taking steps towards pioneering a disciple-making and simple church movement, we hope this podcast reminds you that you're not crazy and you're not alone. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Pastor to Pioneer podcast. Today, I'm here with two dudes, and I'm going to call you dudes because that's a very casual and honoring way to call that. Two dudes from Cincinnati, Jeff Duerler and Andy Dalton. And I'm excited to have them share their story today. It's a really unique and wild story of them listening and obeying Jesus and being part of a traditional church in the Cincinnati area, and how that is now moving towards pioneering some movement of microchurches. And I don't want to spoil the punchline of the story or the climax of the story, or one that you guys are still on. But I'm just really grateful that you guys would be here today and be so willing to share what God's been doing in your life and through your church there, LifeSpring Community Church in the Cincinnati area. I know it's not really Cincinnati, but right outside of Cincinnati. So guys, thanks for being on the podcast today.
Absolutely. We're glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Now, just to clear something up right away, for those that aren't watching the video on YouTube, when I say Andy Dalton, if you're an NFL fan, I don't want you big, oh, you got Andy Dalton, the quarterback, to be on the podcast. No, we're not quite that big yet, but this is the better Andy Dalton, if you ask me.
Yet, I love how you said yet. Like, there's a time that Andy Dalton might come on here.
Well, I mean, it's probably weird for you because, he was in Cincinnati for a long time and you're in that area. It's got to be weird, sharing the same name in the same area.
Absolutely. I don't know if anybody remembers the old Michael Jordan commercials where there was like this older white guy and at an airport trying to get picked up and get out of the way. I want to get Michael Jordan. I'm him. So I get that quite a bit, if you ever leave like a reservation, like, oh, Andy Dalton's coming in, I'm the disappointment.
Well, there's absolutely no famous sports person by the name of Jeff Duerler, so it's a non-interesting.
You never get confused with celebrities, huh? Is that what you're saying?
Never.
Okay. All right. You know what, Andy? It's funny. I literally just saw that commercial this week again, and it was like, as a Chicago sports fan, I loved that so much. And so it's ironic you bring it up. Literally this week, I just saw it again.
That's perfect.
Anyway, we could talk about, Andy Dalton and sports all day, but we're not going to today. We want to just talk about the journey you guys have been on as pastors into pioneering some movements of microchurches, or hopefully what becomes a movement of microchurches. But Jeff, I want to start with you. You've been on this journey a long time. I'm not calling you old. I'm just calling you seasoned, and you've been on this pastoral journey for a long time. So I'd love for you to start by telling us a little bit of your story, maybe a little bit early on, what got you into ministry, and let's start there.
Absolutely. And I just want to thank you, Britton, and everybody who's a part of this. You guys at Pastor to Pioneer have been a huge piece in the journey for us. So I was raised by mom and dad who loved Jesus, and so that marked me, had a powerful influence from a youth pastor at a church I was in. Felt a call to serve Jesus with my whole life and didn't know exactly what that meant, but took some next steps to a Bible college, was studying youth ministry and felt a burden then for the world and global mission, and was shifted over with my wife to have kind of a missionary track. And then her health and sense of calling really limited us from doing global work. So we were signed up to serve Jesus wherever, doing whatever here, and led me on a track into academics. I studied for MDiv and then I got a PhD in Hebrew Bible, brought us to Cincinnati, Ohio, and was not planning on being a local church pastor, but got some postcards in the mail, attended a church down the street, fell in love again with the mission of God's people in the form of a local church, and served, and then ended up stepping in to be a site pastor of that church, LifeSpring Community, starting site number 3 in 2008. And then we were able to see God do good things in people's lives over the years, disbanded multi-site, became autonomous in 2016. And maybe I'll stop there and see what else you want to know.
Well, first, my apologies. I didn't realize that I should be calling you Dr. Jeff. My bad.
Dr. D. My wife calls me the blue collar scholar because I do some real estate stuff too.
Love it. Blue collar scholar. I love it. Um, so okay, you start getting into this. You're doing multi-site. I am curious, what made you guys decide to disband the multi-site and become all these autonomous churches?
Yeah, the thought with multi-site that we felt led to early on was the genius of both and. And so there's this economy of scale, and we did find that there was some blessing there, but we were empowered to lead contextually in our individual communities. And that meant we were kind of going after different things. There's a heroin epidemic at that time happening in our area. We were teaming up with Hope Over Heroin. The other guys were in a very racially diverse area and really going after racial reconciliation. And the more we had freedom to contextualize, the more fruit we seemed to find. We had a new senior minister. He empowered us to be like senior leaders, lead pastors of our sites. And every time we made that move to contextualize, it seemed to be fruitful. So it was not a conflict or a problem or a bad parting. It was snipping the strings that tied us together in like a three-legged race that we were kind of tripping a little bit. And we both started growing. One of the sites ended up closing, and then the other two sites have been thriving.
Awesome. What was that transition like for you, Jeff, of now being like a site pastor to senior pastor? What was that transition like? And then what did the church start to develop to look like in those early years?
Great question. So I did not personally feel I had the profile to be a church planting pastor, and actually did an assessment many years ago that said you're not the parachute into town, charismatic, upfront leader who's going to draw a crowd. But I'm a strong team player and played soccer, midfield in college, and just like that collaborative team role. And so multi-site was awesome because you immediately step in with an existing team. It's kind of like training wheels for many people. And so it worked great. I think what we didn't think about was how could it be short-term training wheels? It was kind of just multi-site forever. And so I think there's a real power to that model, especially when you think church planting. The transition to become autonomous was timely and fit with what God was doing in my life and how he was leading. So it did feel a little bit like Paul and Barnabas parting ways, but not a sharp dispute in the sense of conflict, but more like I am called by God to do this.
Cool.
Someone else, Paul was called to go pioneer new places. Barnabas was called to come alongside and encourage existing churches. And we kind of just felt called differently. So when we obeyed Jesus with that, it was very fruitful. We immediately had some scrambling to do with the infrastructure of church as we know it to kind of cover the bases. But that was very catalytic for like leadership development and our church, kind of like, I don't know, like a 20-some-year-old kid living at home, never worries about their own bills. All of a sudden, when you're living on your own in your own apartment, you take responsibility, you grow up, and you mature. And so we immediately, I think, had the opportunity to grow up in a fresh new way, and the Lord bless that.
Awesome. So that was cranking along for a number of years. You're doing your thing. You're growing. You're obviously getting settled in, finding some success as the pastor now of the church. What led you then to decide, hey, we should maybe do some church planting?
Yeah.
Is that what led you on this journey? Were there other questions that were wrestling in your heart that were leading you into this journey of exploring kind of multiplication and reproduction?
It's a great question, and I think everybody's journey to this is different. So there were a series of things. One was quite surprisingly a bit of a dream, I believe, came from God. At 2016, we were becoming autonomous. I woke in a cold sweat one Sunday morning, and I had this dream. I was free climbing a rock pillar on the coast of probably Greece, somewhere really beautiful. So picture ideal Mediterranean context, villas, beautifully painted villas on the hillside. I'm free climbing, my endorphins and adrenaline's going. I'm feeling great, sunny day, and I'm reaching up over the top of that cliff to get a handhold. And a pebble falls, dinks off my head, and I look at it fall hundreds of feet below into the water. And I realize in that moment, if I fall, I'm going to die. I felt real fear and had a decision to make in my peripheral. There was a building behind me. Again, this is a dream. So there's a building behind me, and I decide, do I reach back and grab it, or do I keep holding on to this rock pillar? And in that second of fear, I let go of the rock to grab the building. And immediately in my sense, I knew it was a mistake. The building immediately began to crumble, and
Wow.
I began to free fall.
Wow.
And when I hit the
Yes.
water, I was just waiting to just get pounded and crushed by all that building debris coming on me. And I come up out of the froth and foam alive. I look at the aghast faces of people on the shore, and I hear these words crystal clear: inevitable collapse. And I was
Wow.
shaken to the core. I thought what that meant was maybe what we were doing and becoming autonomous, that the church was gonna end up dying. I didn't know what it meant. And so I knew enough to know that if there's a dream or a vision, there's an interpretation, and then there's an application. There's sort of several stages to that. So, and I don't come from a huge charismatic tradition, so I should probably put that on the table. So I'm not talking about this lightly. One of 5 times I think in my life I could say I think this was from God.
Mm.
So I went on a jog that morning, and I immediately had more clarity. The words were, climb what I'm building. This is God speaking, not what man creates, because it will inevitably collapse. And so I
Woo.
started to feel a little better in clarity, but I didn't know what it meant. What's the application? What does that mean? Climb what God's building. And so obviously he's building his church on the foundation, and he's shown us what that looks like. So that was the first thing that caused us to reevaluate. We had some land, we had some money, we were outgrowing our existing space because we were at this time in a building, no longer in a high school cafeteria. And so we, instead of building a church building, went to our city and said, well, what does the city need? We want to serve our city, we want to bless our city. And they said, we need more rec spaces. So it led us down a path of building a community center where a church meets. And so the church name is not on the building. It's not a church building. It's a community center. Even now, out in the lobby, I hear kids playing on a free indoor playground and people meeting rooms and tables and things. So that was one of the things that began to cause us to think sort of from a different perspective. And then obviously other influences came alongside and sparked us, I'd say, with a vision to multiply, not just multiplication of disciples, but to actually see more churches, plant churches, etc.
So when you were thinking of multiplication, were you thinking right away, hey, microchurch is what we should be doing? Or were you thinking
Mm.
more in the traditional sense of planting churches?
Our primary influence at that time was exponential. I thought you had to be a church of 1,000 to plant churches. I mean, just in the church growth world and the traditional model, it was, you don't have the financial resources. This is going to cost a lot of money. It's going to take, staff and multiple staff from the get-go. This isn't something just anybody can do. And so God was teaching me and showing me that's not necessarily the case. Their encouragement is begin tithing to church planting, so begin putting money towards it, and start a residency. And so, based on Exponential's level 5 framework, we said, well, let's do that. Let's start giving money. Let's bless and support church plants in our area. Let's encourage people to go be a part of those, be kingdom minded instead of like self kingdom kind of minded. And so we started doing those things, and we said, we're going to create a residency, and that resident will plant a church, and it'll probably look like us because you tend to reproduce who you are, right? DNA.
Totally.
And so that was what we were thinking, but we started praying on it. Enter Andy Dalton.
So Andy, yeah, how did you come into the picture here? Was there just like an invite, like, hey, whoever wants to do this residency, let's do this thing? What? I mean, before I get to that, like, catch us up a little bit about you, and then we'll pick
Mhm.
up here into why you jumped into this residency.
Yeah. Man, cool story from Jeff's point of view, and I think it's awesome because I come out of nowhere. I'm not even in the ballpark, man. So my wife and I, we get married in 2015 and started having a family. And similar to Jeff, I had a dream, and we had 2 kids in a small tri-level house, 3 bedrooms. We're packed to the gills, growing family in this small 1600 square foot house, no storage. And I had this dream that, we wanted to put people in the house, but we didn't have any space for it. And so I looked at Catherine. I was like, I think we got to move. And she's like, why? And so I started telling her my dream, and we started going to these spaces, asking people like, all right, what does this dream mean? Like Jeff said, interpretation of the dream, like an application, what's next? And so we just started praying, Lord, you want us to move? And something happened. I was on my way to go buy something for Lowe's, and something clicked in my head. I'm like, I called her like immediately, like, we got to move. We got to move now. We just, I don't know what it is. I just feel like this stirring in my gut, and let's follow the Spirit. And she said, okay. 2 weeks later, house on the market. 2 weeks later, we move and we get into Harrison, Ohio, which is where LifeSpring is located. And so we get there, but we've been in this same church family. I think we were there for 9 years in this local church family. We had served 4 years as youth leaders, and I thought that was going to be our church forever home. I mean, the church is in Harrison as well, and so we move into Harrison, where our church family is, where we were serving as youth leaders. We were having kids over at our house all the time, and this is it. This is what we're going to do. And then come on, like 2021, maybe 2022. I don't know the time frame exactly off the top of my head, but somewhere around there, we get the stirring to leave. And this is the first time we had really heard the words, if you're not obedient, you're actually being disobedient. So we were being disobedient to the move of the Lord because we didn't want to. We're comfortable. We were serving there. Our family was there. Like our kids have only ever known to be within this. And so this is 2022, I think, because when our third child was born. And so we walked through that at the end of the year, beginning of the next year. And we're in this limbo space where we go out of one church body and we don't know where we're going next. And so we're, kind of like, all right, Lord, where are we going? We're visiting a couple local churches that maybe we should be a part of. And so at the time we were visiting LifeSpring, and we sat down with Jeff and his wife, who Jeff, saw Catherine, like, hey, you guys have been here a couple times, but I don't think I've met you and introduced you. I'm the lead pastor here. And they're having a conversation when I walk up. And he was asking about like maybe getting something to lunch. And so my wife looks at me like, I don't know, what are we doing after second service today? And I was like, sounds like we're getting lunch with you and your wife. And so we go and have lunch with Jeff and his wife, Julie, at Skyline. Great meeting. We've got all our kids there. We leave. Jeff looks to his wife, Julie, and says, I see church plant written on Andy. And I know this because the associate pastor at LifeSpring, John Calabrese, him and I were close, knew from coaching football together. He came into the junior school where I was teaching, and so we had a relationship, and he's like, hey, I heard you guys had a good lunch. Jeff said, and he stops. And I'm like, you can't do this. You can't leave out a cliffhanger, John. What did Jeff say after the meeting? And he says, you have church plant written on you. And at the time in my head, I heard church plan, and I was like, plan? Like, we've got an idea for what, because we had just walked out of the local body, like, because we were doing that correctly, biblically, we're trying to sit down biblically and see what, I was like, I didn't know what that meant. I was like, all right, in one ear, out the other, whatever, John. This is coming up on Easter of like 2022, right, Jeff? Is my timeline right on that, 2022?
No, actually, this is 23, just 2+ years
23.
ago.
You're right. Okay, so I'm a year behind. So 2023, this is Easter of 2023. We, again, been visiting another local church body. We go there on Saturday night. This is New Vision, and they've got a church planter coming from South Africa, Dr. Henrik Vorster. He comes over and he leads the services, and so we're there Saturday night. Catherine looks at me and says, I feel like he should come pray over our family. I'm like, okay, sure. So we introduce ourselves. It's a 5-minute interaction. He prays for us. We leave. Sunday, Easter morning, we go to LifeSpring. We go back home. And again, I think that was 2 weeks prior. We had sat down with Jeff and Julie for lunch. So we're just sitting out front talking with our neighbors, and Catherine's like, hey, that guy who's leading services at New Vision's asking for you at the pulpit. And I'm like, do I got to go up there? Like, it's not that far away. What do you mean to do? We've got friends in service. And so she's like, I don't know, let's see. And so finally, at the end of the service, we get on a phone call with this guy. And at the beginning of service, if you're somebody new leading a guest speaker at a service, hey, thanks for having me. It's Easter. He has risen. Good, you say something like that.
Yeah.
He walked up to service right away and said, where's Andy? I met him last night. Nothing else. Because they were in the service. They're like, we know who you're talking about. We're friends with him. You mean it? And so that's how we got a phone call with him. And he's like, man, the Spirit woke me up last night and said, you're going to go get in a ministry. He's got his hand upon you and your family. Favor's going to be upon you guys. Just a wonderful prophetic blessing to us. And so we were like, thank you. What do we do with this? And so John, like I said, I was close to, and I was like, John, I don't know what to do with this, but I've got this. And he said, Andy, remember a couple weeks ago when you and Jeff sat down for lunch? And I was like, yeah. Didn't he say church plant was written on you? I said, yeah, you said that, but I didn't know what that meant. And he's like, well, we've got a church planting residency here. I was like, what is that? Church plant to me was foreign. Like, I'm traditional minded. Like, I don't know, pastor's been there. You just get somebody else, associate pastor. He steps up if they retire. Like, I don't even know what church planting is. And so that's on a Monday. Saturday morning is my first meeting with Jeff and John. Like, what is this residency and what is it all about? So that's, I don't know, Easter, the next weekend after Easter of 2023. And it's 2025 right now, and the residency is completed, and this is where we're at.
Wow, that's so wild, man. Just an amazing, just leading of the Lord. I do want to clarify for those listeners that are not from Ohio, you just casually threw in that you had lunch with Jeff and his wife at Skyline. That Skyline Chili. That's like the most Ohio thing you could do after church.
Yeah.
So I just don't. I need to do a little interpretation for our non-Ohio listeners.
Yeah. Don't even bring up La Rosa's Pizza and Grater's ice cream.
Ooh, I'm a Michigan guy, but I will give you Grater's ice cream. It's pretty fantastic. The other things, they can go away, but Grater's, legit.
We lived in Georgia for 9 years, and you know where we went after service? CC's Pizza. That was like the tradition when we were in Georgia. And so maybe that's a similar, like if anybody's down south, like CC's Pizza after service. No, it's the Skyline.
I love it. Well, in the midst of all that, it just clearly the Lord is leading you step by step by step. And I think what's fun is I know your story of like even the next 2 years of the residency, it didn't go like you all thought it was going to go, and you just continue to listen to the leading of the Lord and continue to obey. So I'm curious for you, maybe Jeff, of okay, Andy's started this residency, you're cranking away thinking we're going to plant the church like we thought. What was that process like when you began to go, oh, maybe we need to do this differently than we initially thought?
Yeah. Well, we had exposure to disciple-making movements, specifically New Generations, Shadonke Johnson, a movement leader from Sierra Leone, through a network, renew.org network I'm a part of, and had been in a learning community about disciple-making movements. So there had already been exposure that led us in some other ways. We were connected to different underground networks, the friends at Casey Underground, Tampa Underground. So those influences are also there percolating, a growing sense that God is on the move, and what he is building may look different than what man creates. Back to my dream. And so we told Andy early on, one of the things you're going to do on this residency is, first of all, you're not going to grab a mic. You're not going to step on stage. We're going to make sure your foundations are on point with the Lord and in your marriage, even in your finances. And then secondarily, we're going to have you get exposure to all different kinds of churches and church plants. And so that sent Andy on a learning journey, meeting and having interviews with a lot of different people. And so part of that was a growing sense of there are other models that are at play, ancient ones actually, and we've as a church always said, like, hey, we want to be a church that's restoring a broken world by making disciples who make disciples. So that idea of individual ownership, living it out in smaller communities, has kind of already been in our culture. And so what it took was more exposure to, I would say, maybe a spectrum of models from, we know the one extreme of traditional attractional churches, we know it, focused on a growth-based operating system, grow, grow, grow. I was very fluent in that world. Was getting exposure to the opposite, or an opposite end of a spectrum, you could say, disciple-making movements, rapid multiplication of disciples who make disciples that leads to obedient followers, therefore, who become churches, who plant churches, don't need the high budget and the buildings and the organizational infrastructure. Are there iterations between those two? And said, yeah, actually there are several varieties from decentralized networks to centralized networks to simple churches that still have some staff and program and building, but they're very centered on the relational dynamic of life on life, living it out in community on mission. And then, well, what are we? And that sent our elders and leaders in a learning journey, a prayerful learning journey, weighing pros and cons. It's how we met Britton at a No Place Left national gathering, and learning from you and Neil about hybrid models and their strengths and weaknesses, and Roy Moran and Ron Johnson out in Denver and what they're doing. And we kind of created a little bit of a grid and said, here are the options. There really are some there was growing clarity. These are the options. Now, Andy, what are you sensing, and how is the Spirit leading you? Because we want to support that.
Yeah, Andy, I'm curious for you, other than the mysterious door opening in the
My
background.
dog. I'm sorry, my dog just came in over here. Sorry about that.
No, I love it. I just thought it was like, is the Spirit entering the room? The door opens, and here we go. It's getting wild now.
Oh man, no, he decided to come in. He nudged open our doors. We have a black lab, and he nudged open the doors with his nose. I was like, oh, that's Bo, and then he nudged that open, and so
I love it.
sorry
Hey, no
about
worries,
that.
man. But I am curious for you. Obviously, Jeff and the other elders and leaders of the church are really wrestling through some major questions about
Yeah.
who they are as a church, who you guys are as a church, and what does the church plant look like. What's stirring in your heart over this period of time as you're interviewing different churches, different leaders, getting exposed to different ways of being the church and making disciples? What are the things that are starting to stir up in you during this time?
Yeah, up until that point of saying yes to the church planting residency, there have been a couple of really key moments within our walk. One of them, so around that same time frame that we had walked out of the church body we were at for 9 years, um, we had felt the Lord say, put your house on the market. It was after COVID, so the housing market spiked up. We bought in the middle of COVID, and so we would have been able to have this equity in our house and be able to have a financial restart. We weren't the greatest stewards of our finances at the beginning of our marriage. And so we're like, man, this would be a huge blessing to be able to take this equity and restart, And so we were obedient to that, and we were on the market for 50 days. And I'll show you how many offers we had in 50 days. None.
Zero.
None. We had like a ton of people walk through and nothing. So we're like, Lord, we felt really strong alignment, prayed heavily about this, took it off the market on a Saturday. The next Thursday, we live in a HOA neighborhood, a pretty nice one. Somebody else, same price point, very similar square footage house, sold multiple offers less than 24 hours. We're like, if that's not the clearest sign in the world. And so we're like, why in the world? And when we came to realize, like, I think the Lord is looking for our obedience. If you're willing to uproot your family, I mean, again, we've got a newborn, basically. She was born in August. So we got a newborn. We've got, I don't know, right now we've got an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old. So what are they? 2 years ago, a 6 and a 4-year-old, a 6, 4 and a newborn, basically. We've got this, and like, okay, you're willing to uproot and move wherever. We had no clue where we were going. Her parents had asked us that, like, where are you going to go? I don't know. Lord's telling us to put a house on the market. We're going to say yes. And so go to the residency with your initial question, like, what are we feeling? Yes, whatever you say. If you want us to plant traditional, like, all right, let's figure it out. 50 people and $200,000, we'll find a space, we'll host services. If it's Microchurch, and I don't even know what that is. I'm learning all this stuff. Like, all right, lesson number 1, read the book of Acts. Got it. Okay. If we're supposed to be like Paul and Barnabas in the book of Acts, like, what does that look like? I don't know. We'll figure it out. And so, our first meeting with Jeff and John, we're walking around LifeSpring in their neighborhood, and Jeff paints this picture of like, what is this residency going to look like? I don't know. It could be like the book of Acts, where the apostles were just living life day to day, spreading the gospel, making disciples, and then the Holy Spirit was leading, and miracles were happening. And so from day one, when he, kind of painted the picture of what the residency was, Jeff and the elders have been praying about, a resident, and up walks in me, who's like, I'm just going to listen to what the Spirit says. So whatever happens, we're going to follow along, and we're going to go along with it.
So during this time, you're open, obviously, just yes, Lord, whatever you want. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. Did you feel your heart getting stirred more towards microchurch disciple making movements over the span of this time of exploring as the elders are exploring, or are you just like, I don't know what it's going to come down to, but whatever they decide, I'm in?
Yeah, so a lot of it's my wife too. So, like I said, we've got three young children. Our oldest is 8, and our youngest is 2. She'll be 3 in August. Yeah, I think of how can I support and protect and provide for my family, right? That's my first thing. And when my wife and I we sit down and talk and we become equally minded in this, her first thing is, all right, how's this going to affect us and the kids?
Mm-hmm.
And so, one of the cool third affirmations to saying yes to residency was my wife saying, Andy, yes, I think we should do this.
Cool.
And so when we started like, all right, what are we going to plant? From the beginning, Catherine's like, Andy, I don't know if our family is built to be a traditional church plant, especially right now, what that would do and how gone you would be from our kids.
Yeah.
Jeff had come back he was on a sabbatical in the middle of our residency, came back and was talking about, being a church planter and having really young boys is hard.
Yeah.
Because we're getting to that stage with our 6-year-old son. He needs me a lot. And so from the beginning, Catherine's like, I just don't know. And we've loved hosting people. We've loved bringing small groups into our house. We've loved leading small groups. And so that small, intimate, vulnerable gathering in that microchurch style was kind of where we were, leaning towards as it is. But once we really sat down and talked about what are we capable of within our family, it just seemed like, all right, Lord, we're up to whatever, even though it's a different, that's a different paradigm than what, America's used to. We're kind of leaning towards that model of being microchurch, small-minded. And for what our capacity is right now with our young kids, I think this kind of just fits the mold. So we started really, really diving into that. And yeah.
Dude, I think that is so wise of your wife and Jeff and for you to really take that to heart and consider it, because I think sometimes we're just like, let's go, it's a dream, let's make it happen, and
Mm-hmm.
we don't always consider the cost for our family and the impact of our family. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes, and again, this personally, I think we wrongly, willingly think that God's asking us to sacrifice our family for the sake of kingdom or building something or
Yeah.
church, and I think we then are like, it's just part of it. We got to pay the price. It's like, well, are you sure God's asking to pay that price? Because the word has a lot to say about our responsibility first as fathers and second then as church leaders. And so I just commend you for really slowing down, considering that, and not just blazing ahead and heeding the wisdom of others. So way to go, Andy. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. That was my wife is wise beyond her young years. But I think too, like that mentorship of Jeff and Julie, like this has been really 2.5 years of a lot of time spent with them, and in their experience, they've their parents in and of themselves with I don't want to say young kids, a young daughter now who's freshly married, but they've got really, really good discernment and wisdom on their own end to help steer us to where we're at now. So I replay that wisdom you've given to me and give it back to Jeff and Julie.
Awesome.
Well, it's interesting, and I feel like maybe we should pause on this. Somebody maybe really needs to hear this. When I was on my sabbatical, I went to Africa and spent time with hundreds of movement leaders for a catalyst camp New Generation was doing. And I talked to quite a few, and including people who've made switches from traditional legacy type churches to disciple making movement. And every single one said, and Brittany, I think you could probably testify to this too, their family life and disciple making within their families is so much better, stronger, and healthier than the organizational program driven model.
100%.
Mm.
100. Was that surprising to you when you heard that, Jeff?
The continued, my wife was actually the one voicing concern. She was hearing the stories of this rapid multiplication and reaching so many people and the going into the dark and difficult areas, because they're not just sitting there, they're moved by the heart of Jesus to go to unreached people groups. And there's martyrdom, and this is a reality. And she was like, what do they say about their family life? So she was a little shocked to hear that every single one of them said, our family life is so much better. Why? Because together as a family, we're hearing and obeying Jesus. we do that together as a family, and it's powerful. And you don't always get that. You can, but you don't always get that in the model we've inherited.
Yeah, man, incredible. Thanks for sharing that. That's so incredible. I am curious though for you, Jeff. It'd be fun to dig a little bit more now into that journey of where you guys are wrestling through this. You're trying to figure out, based on all these people you're talking to, all these models that are out there, how did you guys discern this is what's best for us? This is what God's asking of us. What does that process look like? Because a lot of the pastors that we work with, a lot of them, especially their lead pastors, are asking those questions. Can I do this within my existing church? Can I do a hybrid? Can I add this on? Do I transition my church? What does this mean for us? They're not just thinking about themselves. They're thinking about those that they are shepherding. And so I think there's just a lot to glean from your guys' journey. Not that that's a one size fits all, but I think there's just a lot that you processed really well that I think we could benefit from hearing more specifics about that process.
I'd love to share about it. You've been a key player, you and Neil, helping give us some perspective from your experience. I'm a researcher, so I do a lot of networking, a lot of calling, and kind of concluded if we were to go a hybrid route, there's 4 varieties. This is just for us, the way it played out. One would be just full-on decentralized network of simple micro or house churches. Another option is let's say Andy starts a centralized network of simple micro or house churches, meaning there's still an assembly and a gathering, but nobody thinks that's quote unquote church. It's just visited a lot of different groups doing the centralized model as well. And then there are 2 models that we found that could characterize a church like us that would not involve trying to turn the Titanic overnight and flipping it. One would be we intentionally pursue a disciple-making culture and don't immediately reduce programs. Keep doing all the same programs, but reinvest greater focus and meaning to them. It does mean some shift in the vision, the values, the strategy. You change your metrics, your language, your definitions start to shift. You role of leadership, collaborative team leadership, and different expectations for what does success look like. And some financial sustainability, begin working on some of those things so you're not so dependent and feel the financial pinch if and when you raise the bar and it starts to create a little turbulence. So another model would be actually just actively reduce programs. The old school simple church, the book was written on this. So you just do a weekend gathering and you do midweek missional groups and maybe you do student ministry, simple staff, maybe a building, simple budget. We said, all right, those are 4 types of hybrid. They're not necessarily the parallel tracks hybrid, but some of them could involve infusing DNA, a lion and a tiger mate. They have a liger, or something like that. A little different than a hybrid car. It runs on gas or electric, one or the other. Well, what if it's not fully both at the same time, as I understand it. So we were looking at these options and we said, well, what if we tried to do parallel tracks and we were told very clearly, you need a semi-permeable firewall between the 2, where on the back end, you can do some logistical support, but there needs to be a very clear, these are 2 separate things, and you need to have practitioners in both, but expecting people to toggle between the 2 and be bilingual will be very, very challenging. And so we weighed the pros and cons, and basically we said, all right, if we launched Andy under the LifeSpring leadership umbrella with a parallel track to do a simple church, house church, microchurch, whatever language we want to put on that, wow, that would be great referrals. We could refer people who feel that calling. We could say, well, hey, here's this expression of this missionary venture with the lost. And you could get some economy of scale with central support. But honestly, the new thing doesn't need a lot of financial infrastructure and staffing help. The cons list was longer than the pros. And some of this came out of some stuff you guys shared, Britton. First of all, we said, are our elders bilingual? Are they able to provide proper oversight, accountability, and support to both tracks? And our elder said, I think it's asking too much of us.
Wow.
We don't have that. And then you brought up this in a breakout you led on the big danger of confusion, stress, frustration among the people, and the church identity itself, trying to be both and. The temptation for people to feel that magnetic pull back into the programmatic church could limit or water down the new thing. Danger of leaders of the new thing, like Andy, maybe not being all in because, for instance, maybe he's not all in the sense of being a true co-vocational leader if he's on staff, with the church. And so what is that model in terms of replicability? And then less possibility for collaborative partnerships with other churches. So if Andy is going to do recruiting in the community with people who have a vision for this, and he's doing it as a LifeSpring thing or under the LifeSpring umbrella, it's harder for maybe a kingdom pull for other churches to refer their people into it. So the other idea was then, well, let's launch it as a new thing outside of the church as we know it. And we just weighed all of those pros and cons and how's that work. Just the bottom line that I pulled from my research is greater fruit comes from greater autonomy, unless the Lord is saying go a different route. So there weren't a lot of cons to that beyond the big gulp factor of just stepping out in faith. And I think God had already been grooming both of us for that.
Well, one of the things I've really appreciated about the way you've gone about this, Jeff, through our initial meeting at the breakout at the conference, and then just a couple ongoing calls, is you've really been open-handed and said, I want what the Lord wants. We want what the Lord wants. And you've done diligent wrestling. And I think, there's Jesus talks about that of counting the cost. And the reality is no matter what option you do, there is a cost. And it's not like this one has a cost and that option doesn't have a cost. They all have a cost. But you've just done such a good job of really weighing to the best of your ability, okay, what are the costs of which one of these we choose so that we know what we're getting into instead of oh my gosh, we didn't see that coming. Let's stop. You have a very realistic understanding. Again, not of everything. You can't predict everything that's going to happen, but just likely what will this entail? And I think you've done it with a heart of a shepherd as well. You're caring about the lost, you're caring about what could be, but you're also just caring about the people that God has entrusted to you at LifeSpring of saying, this isn't good for them to just stop and go do this instead. And so I just think that's so wise.
Our analogy for that, Britton, was turning the Titanic. We can steer against the current, and we can and will continue with our strongest effort to go back to scriptural models, Jesus' example, and the mandate there to make disciples who make disciples. But the time that's going to take when you've got these lifeboats, people like Andy with a missionary disciple maker calling, get them on those boats, send them off, they can pivot, they can start going in a new direction right away today. And that kind of helped us say, yeah, that's it. That's what we're doing.
So for clarity, what you guys landed on, because you initially thought maybe some kind of hybrid thing. So what I hear you saying is what you've landed on is you guys are going to continue to make small changes, line up with scripture as the Lord leads you as the Titanic, right? I like that with the rudder. But launching Andy out to start a separate autonomous network of disciples and microchurches. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay, so you guys come to this conclusion. What was that like for you, Andy? Be like, okay, this is what I'm doing. What was that process like of deciding, let's do this, pull the trigger?
It was great about every step of the way within this, leading up into accepting the residency, throughout the residency, in this launching and commissioning for my wife and I. It's been really, really slow in terms of, all right, let's make sure we're moving in the correct direction. Let's really pray about this. Let's make sure we seek the Lord into this and not just jump because we're excited. You know what I mean? And so I really love that within Jeff and LifeSpring and how they've handled it. So it tied in with a 2-year discipleship journey that LifeSpring was getting is in the middle of now. And when we were commissioned and launched, it was at the same launching of that discipleship journey. And so it was perfect timing for that. It was great to be able, like, all right, we're going to join in with LifeSpring's goal of making disciples, and we're just doing it to people who won't step into a church building. Right? That's kind of the vision of what Catherine and I we see is LifeSpring's doing a great thing. They're bearing good fruit. Let them continue to do what they do. Again, small changes, but they don't have to go and reinvent the wheel. Right? They're going to keep doing the same thing they're doing, just as other local churches. They're having fruit. They're seeing disciples being made. Instead of them, what they're doing is wrong or stopping. Why can't we go along, support, and move in the cracks? And so there's my analogy is there's a sphere of influence each local church body has, but it's limited in some capacity, in some way. Each of our local bodies here in Harrison, they're limited. So within their areas that they can't reach, where can we fill in? Where can people who want to go, the lifeboats, for instance, lifeboats can go smaller places, quicker and faster. They don't need as much. And so that was kind of, our desire in launching. And so when this happened, it was what we've been really the last year after our assessment last April has been kind of narrowed in on this focus. So we knew what we were going to do. We were just hammering at the details. And so now we're meeting with a couple other families that feel the same kind of pull and desire to live missionally for the lost and those who don't know and won't step into a church building. And so we're just trying to gain some rhythms and see what happens.
That's awesome. So you're meeting regularly with a group of people. Is that taking place in your home?
Different. So we've met. This will be next week will be the 4th time we've met. We meet every other week from advice from a local house church planter as well. If you meet every single week, that becomes the church versus we are leaders to go set out to make our own microchurches and make our own disciples. Cool. And so we meet every other week. We are encouraging about 7 total families in general. And right now it is rhythms. What rhythms are we doing to make disciples? We've got to be good disciples ourselves in order to make disciples. And then it's really honing on the vision. If you go back, Casey Underground, they've got a lot of podcasts. If you listen to the very, very first one, they say an amazing quote. If you go to make a church, you might get disciples. If you go to make disciples, inevitably, you'll have church.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great quote. Yeah. Andy, for you, even personally, this has come at a cost. You've been willing to say yes to the Lord, and now as it's gotten clarity, okay, you're launching into make disciples, microchurches that hopefully reproduce microchurches. But this has required you to step away from a decade career of teaching and probably, I don't know, maybe just equal, if not more important, coaching. I know coaching has been a big part of your life. Yeah. You've had to say no to all of those things to step into this. What's that been like, saying goodbye to things that you love?
Yeah, you hit it pretty right. I had identity crisis. Coach Dalton, that was my name. That's what it was. I played college football. I coached college football before coming here to coach high school. I coached football. Oh, and then I taught. That was kind of how I looked at it, and which was very incorrect. I know this now, but yeah, it was saying yes to whatever the Lord has for us is fulfilling and scary at the same time. When you take up your cross, I've got to die. Andy Dalton is dead. The new Jesus Christ living through me is alive and living is it's tough. Tough for our family. Consistency, that consistent pay and insurance. And you knew exactly, I could tell you what this next school year is going to bring. They already have their district calendar posted. So moving into this new career and this new field has been really tough for, my wife, women and wives with mothers as well in that mindset. They want to feel secure and safe and supported. And we know we're going to be supported. The Lord has our hand, has us in His hands, but it's still scary. You're taking a step out in faith. And I think, Jeff, you said this when we were talking about this transition. You know how you spell faith? It's R-I-S-K. Right. And so, and she's not the biggest fan of change, so it's been tough. the last Wednesday was our last school day. That was kind of tough. I turned my keys in. I turned my computer in. I'm not an employee there that I was for the last 10 years. And it's in our backyard. It's 4 minutes away. Our kids were going to I was going to have them in class. They were excited for that. So it's been tough. And also I think tough because I haven't started yet. I haven't started my other full-time vocation. And so, we'll see if we come back and talk to you, Britton, in 6 months. That'll be a better understanding of what's happening. But it's a little scary. We know the Lord has us, but we're just kind of in this little limbo area between.
As I love, what is it? You said you're doing a new career. What is that new career you're going to be stepping into?
Yeah, so the organization is called Rock Solid Families, and they are a faith-based coaching nonprofit that is aimed at building communities through helping individuals, families, couples through the power of Jesus and the Word of God. And so my title will be life coach, and I'm going to be able to sit in sessions with young adults, young kids, couples through premarital counseling, marital counseling, all these different things. But also outside of that, they do regular podcasts. I've been on a couple now. Strong Dads is the podcast that Merle Hutchinson, he helps leads, and I've been co-hosting with him. But they'll do other sessions. They did one within our backyard, how to parent in the tech-heavy world, taking the book Anxious Generation. I don't know if you've heard of it or the readers or listeners of this, but they take some of the values of that with the biblical principles of what God says to lead our family with, and they put it together in our day and age in this generation where you're a second, third grader, and some kids already have phones. They already have access to this unlimited technology at their fingertips at an age where they're not meant to mature enough to be able to handle that. You get fifth graders, they're getting computers. How do you teach kids to manage that biblically? And so it's a phenomenal organization that we're going to be able to be a part of. I'm excited to see what the Lord's going to do with that. It's a ministry in and of itself, so it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Well, and I think, you're hitting on something that I'm just realizing a lot with a lot of the pastors that we walk with is, even if it's led by the Lord, even if it's exciting what's to come, there's loss. And so, one of the things I just encourage you and your wife to maybe consider that I've learned that I've seen a lot of people do well is grieve what you're leaving behind. List those losses, name those losses together, grieve those together and say, that stings. Like, I'm sad we're leaving those things behind. Because it's like, you got to say goodbye. That's part of transition, saying goodbye to what was to really embrace what's next. It's the death, burial, and resurrection. You got to let the things die, as you're talking about, to embrace resurrection. Sometimes some kind of funeral-like service helps with that, just to say goodbye.
That's smart.
I just have seen it time and time and time again. So, but Jeff, back over to you. I guess I'm curious for you. What does the ongoing relationship with Andy look like for you? How are you feeling at this point of the launch? What's the church? What's LifeSpring feeling about all of this? Where are things at today from your perspective?
Yeah, it's interesting because I really wanted to go. I wanted to step down and step into a different kind of vocational ministry. I've had a little bit of side real estate stuff with rental properties that have kind of built some side stream income. And my wife and I have been excited to have GetawayTogether.us. We've got a few vacation cabins as Airbnbs. And as that business, we poured a lot into it, but as it's growing, there's some financial sustainability. And so I was geared up to step down from my role and lean into that more and be freed up to focus on people, again, lost people who aren't interested in church buildings and such. And the Lord said no, not to step down, which was a surprise. And then, but what I am doing is I'm going to decrease my hours later this year. I'm a part of the 7 couples Andy mentioned. So I'm under Andy as in this Microchurch network in its fledgling form as a practitioner, and haven't been able to lean in beyond prayer and don't have a clear sense of my mission field. I know there's 4 unreached people groups represented in our greater Cincinnati area. The guys in Pod B of the Butler County Jail are another group that isn't going to be showing up for our services this weekend. We've got families of kids with special needs. And then this kind of new thing emerging among some contractors and people in the building in building trades that's kind of I'm curious about. I'm going to decrease my hours. I'm going to decrease my pay and from the church and have this side calling and use that as a ministry, either provision for the time to invest or actually the means of investing in people's lives. So Andy and I are going to be very close in an ongoing way in that
Our
way.
roles have flipped.
Yes. And then from respect to the church, Andy's still a part of our church family. He'll be providing updates. We do prayer calls weekly with him and his small core team. And so we're going to continue to hear from him. He's going to be on a panel on stage in our 3 services on Father's Day weekend. So there's going to be regular connection, support, love, and any resourcing that's needed. But right now we know it's mainly prayer and affirmation.
I love it. And I think, what I've, again, always been encouraged by, well, you both, but even for you, Jeff, is a lot of times when we are the senior leader and we start having this stirring, we feel like, oh, that means I'm leaving right now. I need to go. I thought that, and it was an 8-year journey. It took me 8 years before the Lord said, now you can go. And just, you've been so open-handed of saying, Lord, what is it that you want? And you're pioneering. It just is a different pathway of pioneering than Andy's pioneering, but you're both pioneering new ways. And I just think that is such a helpful thing for our listeners to realize, like, no, our job is to listen and obey. And it's not going to look the same. It's not going to be the same pace. It's not going to be the same way. Listen and obey. Whatever Jesus is telling you to do, go do. And it might not be what you think it's going to be. And I think your story, Jeff, is a great example of that. Like, I can't wait to see in 6 months, a year, 3 years, where it's going to be, I'll have you guys back on. I didn't want to wait, though, because I think there's just something about when you're in it. Like, we love to tell the story on the back end. Oh, look, God was faithful. We learn from lessons. Like, you guys are in it right now. 4 meetings in for you guys. And it's a lot of unknown. And I just think there's a rawness, an authenticity, an unresolvedness to the story that I'm excited to follow up in the future and hear how it's been going. I just think there's so much that we've been able to glean from your story. And as we're wrapping up here, guys, is there anything else that you feel like would be helpful for our listeners to know? Any wisdom, anything stirring from the Spirit in you that you feel like, hey, I just want to make sure I shared this as an encouragement as we wrap up today?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll go first. For me, I didn't understand, when we talk about extraordinary prayer, what that actually looks like. Our context in America is so vastly different. Just from stories, I'm just got way more experience within new generations and DMM movements overseas. But I would say two, coupled with one, that and in community, there is multiple groups. Like I can think of like 3 separate groups of prayer that I am surrounded with, that I know that I could really, like, I got to reach out to these 2 guys that I meet every single Wednesday morning, and I need some prayer. And they are warriors that are going to get after it. There's a Sunday morning group that every single Sunday we meet, we're praying. All right, guys, I got to put this before you. I'm struggling here. There is another, the core team of people who are on this journey of this Microchurch network. Like, guys, so the aspect of being able to lean on people, because you're right, in this moment of like, I'm struggling. Who do I have that I can go to? Who's the Paul and Barnabas? Lord said, I'm going to send you out 2 by 2. There was never a singular, I'm doing it by myself. And so having the community and having a chance to speak with the Holy Spirit in this conversational aspect of prayer, like, yeah, there's some grieving going on. There's some hurts or struggles, or like, I want to praise you. And so I would say community and prayer would be the 2 that I would encourage.
Yeah, that's good. I'll add to that and say, for years we focused on the what and the how, and I feel like the Lord was calling us to focus on the who and the why. And this maybe is helpful for somebody else out there. It's so easy to get sucked into focusing on the strategies and the specific what we do and miss just the heartbeat of the Father for lost ones and chasing after them. And so focusing on the who, the people and the heart of God. That's the thing that was unmistakable from my time with the folks doing the disciple-making movement. They have a strategy. We need a strategy. Jesus has given us the strategy. But if we don't have the heart and the eyes to see the people, I think we'll miss it. And I think prayer and community can help build that.
Yeah, that's good. That's what my follow-up question was going to be like, well, how do you grow in cultivating that why, the heart of God? You're just saying spending time with him and or what?
Yeah.
How have you grown that in yourself?
I just finished up a 2-year study of every imperative from Jesus in the Gospels in Greek. And I really wanted to, if we're supposed to teach people to obey all the commands, what are they? I wanted to see the list. I searched for the list. If somebody else has the list, don't give me an English list. Like, what are the Greek commands of Jesus? I couldn't find the list, so I made a list. And I was quite surprised. How many do you think there were, Britton? All 4 Gospels combined. Even if you can't count them separate, like the same command, but it's in, let's say, 2 Gospels.
82.
250 some.
I'm not even in the ballpark.
If you harmonize, the Sermon on the Mount alone is 40 some. If you harmonize the Gospels, you get down to about 200. So, hey, same command, but it's said twice or whatever. Of those commands, what do you think is the most common command of Jesus? I'll give you an example. Is it have to do with loving people and caring for their needs? Does it have to do with fearing God and not fearing man? Does it have to do with trusting and believing and abiding? Or does it have to do with being awake, not being asleep, watching out?
Well, each one that you listed, I was like, yeah, that's it. And then the next one, no, that's it. The next one, no, that's the one. I actually think it's the latter.
It is. Beware, watch out, stay awake, stay on guard. The number one cluster and singular Greek word command of Jesus involves like a watchfulness, a readiness, a discernment. And so I think there's something telling there for us with Jesus' commands and not cherry picking and picking the commands of Jesus. And by the way, there are a lot of implicit commands, not just, in his stories, in his other teaching. So I think you get the heartbeat of God by hanging with Jesus, not Jesus. Not Jesus, cry, I, the Messiah. You got to get focused on the real Jesus, take in all of his teaching. And we have a distorted Jesus that doesn't have a missional heartbeat. And second, being around other people in community with a prayerfulness. I think learning from, and I say community, not just physical people in your room, but I'm talking the global community, getting around people, this podcast, all the other helpful networks that get plugged and referenced, and the guys, frankly, that are laying their lives on the line of disciple-making movements globally. We have a lot to learn from them, and that's where I feel the heartbeat is inflamed in me.
I love it. Well, guys, thanks for being on the podcast. Such great insight, such great wisdom, such great faith building from your story. Keep going, guys. I'm really excited to hear what the Lord does, and maybe do this again in a year and do part 2 to follow up with where things are at. It's been a real gift today, guys, a real gift.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Britton, for having us.
And as always, those of you that are listening, if you want to hear more about Jeff and Andy's stories, have questions for them, just reach out to us, and I'll get you in touch with these guys. They would be more than willing to share more as you guys have questions. So thanks again, guys. Thanks so much for listening today. Wherever you're at on the journey from pastor to pioneer, we would love to journey with you and support you. You can find more information and get in touch with us at pastortopioneer.com.